Welcome back. I have a progress video for April 2018. I think this is video 11, and this will probably be in a couple pieces just to show some progress as it happens. What I've done most recently is ballast and paint the double track main through at least a portion of Du Bois, Pennsylvania. So going out to Falls Creek, still unpainted and unballasted, but about halfway into Du Bois, got the track painted and ballasted. And something I did for the first time, and I may continue doing it, I actually did that. I painted the rails after I ballasted it, and it's probably really hard to see, but it creates a little bit of a shadow. The overspray creates a little bit of a shadow underneath the rail, and I like the effect. And sometimes I've seen on real prototype tracks, some of the rust gets knocked off just from the activity of the trains, and that does fall underneath the rails. So it tends to, I just think it looks a little bit crisper and makes the rails look even smaller than doing it the other way. So I kind of did that by accident, but might go do that moving forward, paint the rails after I do the ballast. So that was through this area. Also did a little bit more scenery work here at C&M Junction. Painted and ballasted the Clearfield branch in the background, so that's obviously not as well maintained as that's a branch line, and that actually went out of service in the 90s. So the tracks in the foreground are still in use in reality, but the ones in the back were pulled out in the 90s. So kind of show that those at 1974 were probably already maintained at a lower rate. At least that would be my presumption. So, and then the other primary thing I've been working on, and this is the part that I'll do in a couple steps, is PPC Lubricants. If you recall, last time there was just a little bit of siding on this one face. Now I've got the roll-up doors in place for the two dock level doors. I've got a pair of drive-in doors, as well as a personnel door there, and probably like an emergency escape personnel door all the way in the back. The prototype has more dock doors than that, but this is all I was able to fit on the compressed version. You can't see it from here, but actually there's siding all the way around except for this one face. And I've got it all painted. I'm just waiting. I'm going to need some windows. The office in the prototype is actually off the back corner here. Obviously, because of the slope, I don't have room for that. So I'm just going to throw a couple of windows, in this area to the left of that personnel door, to at least show that there is a small area of office, and then the rest will just be as is. Then I've got roofing to do. This looks like it's a silver or white painted roof according to current Google Maps. Who knows what it looked like in '74? I assume this even building was there. But again, we have to take some liberties to do our railroad. So, and then the back has kind of a tan, I kind of looked like, I don't know if it's some kind of cement board based on what I can tell, for the unloading facility. And again, in the prototype, this unloading facility is actually off the back. Again, couldn't get the track work to operate that geometry. And it was also slightly detached and has some type of auger or something that pipes the material into the facility. So again, a little bit of a modification, but I think it's a reasonable representation. So more work on this building. Also did all the weathering for the concrete loading dock. Took a pair of wooden railroad ties, painted them black, and actually tacked them with railroad spikes countersunk in. Probably can't even see that, but for the trailer bumpers. So more to follow as we progress. Welcome back. In the last video, we talked about the scratch building of a PPC Lubricants building, and I regret having mentioned the date in that first part of the video, because it was supposed to be a multi-part video. That was in April. It's now July, so oops. Anyway, we have finished the roughing of the exterior, at least. It still needs weathering and some significant detailing. But finished all of the siding all the way around, finished the roofing materials. One of the big delays was in these windows. I was going to purchase some and just ultimately decided to scratch build some windows. I mean, this is a 1970s vintage building, at least I think, and pretty dull, unexciting vinyl white windows, probably pretty typical then. So I just used some channel or some L-shaped materials. I can indicate what those are in the comments or in a subscript. Also not sure, Google Maps shows the roofing as white rolled roofing. Don't know if that existed in 74, but just for some interest I did that, different from the more conventional black rubber roofing. I cut it into 12-foot strips. Again, that's a modern roll of roofing. I'm assuming that's similar in 74, but just used manila envelope that was cut to scale, and then into long strips, and then cut them accordingly and glued them down. This will certainly not be a worthy of a merit award of any kind. This is simply just scenery on the railroad to add to the operations. So it's really just masonite panels with some made from 1x2s that were ripped in half. And so using a couple different methods to adhere the siding and roofing. One method I tried was using wood glue, too thick. Also tried using some contact cement. That's a little bit tedious. Ended up seeming, or for at least for me, gluing the manila envelope down to the masonite worked best with Mod Podge. It's a little thinner than white glue is, and it worked relatively well with some weights on top of it to make sure there were no bubbles in the roofing material. And then I came back and touched up the edges. Maybe you can't see it. Touched up the edges with a little bit of black acrylic paint, which kind of looks like seam material or treatment. Also, can't necessarily see, I made a drip edge. This is the same material I used for the windows. Yeah, just a little, it's probably way too big for, it's probably 8 inches instead of a much smaller drip edge, but just creates a little bit more detail. So finished the loading dock area, and actually bought one of the first maybe handful of trucks for the railroads. So still have no HO scale figures yet. That'll be like one of the final details. I'm getting close to feeling like I'm done when I start adding those, but this is the first or second truck for the whole railroad so far. So the siding was a different story, and in hindsight I should have taken the time. I was just too lazy or resistant to order something in the mail and wait for it to come. So if the hobby shop didn't have it, I sometimes don't buy it. This siding is styrene corrugated metal siding. Obviously that's challenging to glue to masonite, so I used permanent double-faced tape. I suspect that in 15 years all this siding, the tape will dry out and all this siding will just fall off the building, but we'll see. So in the future I'll probably order, I think they do make balsa or basswood siding. So if I'm using masonite as a substrate for the building material, I should probably stick with similar wood products, so I can just use wood glue, or just start using styrene to fabricate the interior framework of the building. So, but that's where we are with PPC Lubricants. So a little bit of progress. Panning slowly here. Not a whole lot of progress on this area. However, last we left off, over into the Falls Creek area, there was no backdrop, and the reason, we'll pop over here in a minute, but the reason there was no backdrop, I'll turn a light on here, is I wanted to make sure I finished the benchwork for the staging area that will be Brookville and points into Ohio for the Penn Central tracks coming out west out of Falls Creek. So here is the main track going into the upper staging area, which we looked at previously, and then just a small, probably a 2-track yard. Maybe each track will hold 6 or 8 cars. Slope ended up being a little steeper than I'd liked, but it's, again, we're only going to be shoving cuts of 6 cars at a time probably, so that even a switcher should have no problem doing that. And that won't really be an operating element. I'll probably do that switching in between operating sessions. These cars right here are supposed to be somewhere else, but till that staging yard is complete, I just shove them down to the end of this particular track. But this will be the area that ends up being the switching lead for that Penn Central train. But again, that would probably just occur in between sessions. This third track in the yard here is what I'm considering to be the interchange track between Penn Central and Chessie. Here is the Diamond, or what will be the Diamond, and I think in 74, best I can tell, both railroads had removed one of their 2 tracks. So the the crossing will just be back here. I'm going to leave the other road bed just in ballast to reflect the fact that those tracks were removed. And there will be another pagoda style tower. This will be the Falls Creek Tower in this area. So having completed at least the benchwork, so I knew that was in, I put in another piece of backdrop, and I should have done this full seams on all of the railroad, but at the time I started back into the hobby, I was wrapping up doing a house renovation project and couldn't look at another piece of drywall tape or joint compound. So but now I'm back to this, and I'll probably just use a wet sponge to smooth that in rather than sand, because that's a little bit messier. So now I've got this backdrop in, cut an opening and kind of bent the ears back to create a little bit smoother transition into the loop that goes down to staging, and then ultimately there'll be some other backdrops to kind of close the gap, so you can't see into the back area. Like I said, the switch tower or the interlocking tower that'll hide some of the scenery, some trees, and that tower is probably, I think it was supposed to be inside the diamond. As a matter of fact, I know it was, and this isn't even a full Y. I couldn't fit that in there. So again, it's just representative and a place to store traffic. As we talked about previously, the Burke Parsons Boley plant will be in this area right up to, I'll probably run the backdrop around the corner, maybe put a little small mirror here just to reflect the Penn Central tracks going all the way over into Ohio. So we're down to just one more piece of backdrop to be installed until we talk about the Indiana branch, but at least the primary portion of the railroad that I am working on, the benchwork is all in, and one more piece of backdrop. This is the only vent in my basement to heat it. I never open it, so I'll probably just masonite over it, and in the future when the railroad gets removed, the vent will still be there, so that's probably what I'll just do with that. So the only other thing I've been working on is I purchased, and I did an experiment, I purchased I've been using a lot of AccuRail and Bowser rolling stock, particularly because they're both made in the United States, and since, as I mentioned, I'm primarily into operation, I find them to be reliable. I think they're good detail for what I'm doing. If you are, if you're someone who's really into details, obviously having molded ladders and so forth isn't going to be acceptable to you, but for me, for operating, I think Bowser and AccuRail are perfect for me. And AccuRail's system of renumbering decals, I had never tried that before, so I figured, you know what, I'll buy a sample of 4 cars and I will buy a set of decals and see how it goes. And it went so well, I'm going to buy another 8 cars, because you can actually do up to 13 really, but they give you 12 decals, and then there's the 1 car, the original number, coming from the factory. So you can see it. You can see the little bit of shadow around there, but I mean, I'm zoomed in with the camera, but from any reasonable distance, even on the ends, well, you won't be able to see that because of the lighting, but even on the ends of the cars, it worked out really well. It does work better if you do a gloss coat over the entire car first. You put the decal on, gloss coat it again to really seal the edges, and then dull coat the whole car. So it's a little bit of a process, but that's the standard detailing, or sorry, that's the standard decaling process that I use as a result of some friends of mine in my division who have given me some advice that works really well. I didn't used to do the second coat of gloss. I always did gloss underneath and then dull coat on top, but doing a second coat of gloss over top of the decal is really a nice methodology. But that worked so well, I'm going to use, like I said, I'm going to order 8 more of these cars. They're a little early. They're in the 50s, so I'm sure they were floating around on the railroad, trying to find the exact, there's a different style of paint and lettering for B&O that I have a lot of photos of on this particular division of the Chessie's Pennsylvania division that would probably be even more prototypically accurate, but we're getting kind of close. I have the same problem with Canadian National cars. They were all over this segment of our railroad because we went up to Buffalo. But the only CN cars that seem to be available, from many of the manufacturers are either much more modern, like they have a website address on them, which wouldn't be appropriate in '74, or they're like from the 50s. So a little out of time, but we keep trying to make the rolling stock a little bit more appropriate for the time. So that's my update for that. The only other thing I'm waiting on is apparently the Atlas number 6 custom line Code 83 turnouts that I've been using for the entire railroad are out of stock everywhere. So I guess we're waiting for those to come in from China. And if I didn't have, I think maybe 4 or 5 turnouts I need to finish the upper staging yard and the staging yards into Brookville. If I didn't have just that, I'd probably just change and use a different manufacturer, but the geometry of everything is set up for those, and I'm certainly not going to hand lay turnouts in a staging yard. That's just not going to happen. So that's a little frustrating. So again, thanks to Bowser and AccuRail for manufacturing things here in the United States. And as a matter of fact, I live in Pennsylvania, and Bowser is a Pennsylvania manufacturing company, so happy to always support those. So speaking of scratch building, this crossing, this is a 23-inch radius. I have a straight segment coming through, or tangent section coming through in the Penn Central. So I think what I'm going to do here, this is going to have to be a scratch built turnout. I think I'm going to put some track in proper alignment on either side and get the rails as close as I can, and then just put a piece of paper over it and use a piece of charcoal in order to just kind of get a rubbing of that. Then I'll put that on a piece of Homosote just on the workbench, and then I can tack down and start, the geometry will be correct to scratch build a crossing. So always more to do, but we are making progress, and that's what we have for now. Thanks for watching.